Hi everyone and welcome. It's Brandy Burke for Dare to Be Artsy. I blog at goodstuffmama.com, and if this is your first time joining me, welcome, welcome. I share simple card making ideas that anyone can do with minimal supplies and effort. My hands are often as inked up as my stamps because crafting is fun and cleaning is not, so please excuse any messes that you see. Now today we'll be making this simple 4x4 watercolor card on watercolor paper using the Dare to Be Artsy BEEutiful Stamp set. And you can pretty much use any supplies that you have on hand to recreate this card. This Dare to Be Artsy BEEutiful Stamp set has matching dies that you can get, and we'll be using them in a later card video, but this card's so simple it requires no dies at all. Now I'll also be using my Misty stamping tool. You don't have to have this to make this card, but since I'm stamping on watercolor paper that has a lot of texture, I just find it's easier to get a good impression. And though I say easier, you'll see in this video, it actually takes several tries to get an impression I'm happy with. I'm using the watercolor card, and it is cut 8 inches long by 4 inches wide and scored at 4 inches just so I could make this card a small 4x4 card. I'm scoring it really well because I'll need that score line later. And then just to add a bit of interest here, I'm going to use a corner rounder on 2 of the 4 corners. Now I guess you could do it on all 4 if you like, but I typically like to just do it on the 2 at the opening edge of the card. Like I said, I think it just adds a little bit of interest when we're going super simple like we are today. I'm going to lay it flat and then tape off a section on the left-hand side, and I'm using fairly thick washi tape. And this tape's not going to be a part of my design, so no worries if it doesn't match what you're working with. Honestly, I usually pull a roll from the shelf that I'm fairly certain I'd never use in a project. I'm going to stick down 2 strips on the card, and the first one is going to be right here on the left-hand side, butted just up against that score line that we created. Don't forget to be sure that you've stuck your washi tape to your shirt or jeans several times just to remove some of that sticky, because you need it to block color, but if you don't do this, it will definitely pull up a layer of your watercolor paper. Sorry for my head there. It's even worse that it's like an off day and I don't think I've even brushed my hair. Anyway, this next strip's going to be stuck down about 1/2 inch to the right of the score line, and then that valley in between is where you're going to spread all your pretty color. Now I've chosen squeezed lemon, I always want to say squoze, peacock feathers, and picked raspberry. I always choose colors that will look good if they mix with each other, so you'll just want to follow your color wheel. And then I am a terrible distress ink blender, just like I am a terrible Copic colorer, so there's no fancy blending going on here. I'm just going to add color down the side of this and then barely work to blend it together. Excuse all the shaking, my camera rig is flimsy at best. I try to always go back over those colors just slightly at the intersect point so it looks like I made some attempt to blend. I figure if it looks like I tried, that's worth something. And again, I just choose colors that when next to each other won't make brown. There's nothing wrong with brown if it works with your color scheme, but it's not right for this card. My squeezed lemon and peacock feathers go together to make a pretty green, and my peacock feathers and picked raspberry create just a bit of purple. And all 3 of these colors plus their blends work nicely on the floral stamp that we're going to use for this card. Now I'm just going to take a bit of clean water on a fan brush and splatter both big and small drops onto the distress ink. And after a second or 2, I dab it away using a clean section of a paper towel. Now this technique is nothing new to you if you're a card maker, and you could skip this part altogether if you wanted to, but just adding a bit of interest without having to have any fancy tools is super cool to me. Now I'll just go ahead and peel away the tape. The key here is to pull the tape slowly back on itself and then stop if you feel any hint of tugging or ripping at all. I stuck the washi tape repeatedly to my jeans before I stuck it on the card, so it did a really good job of blocking off areas for color and pulling up nicely when I was done. I'm going to throw this folded card into the Misty and anchor it down with a hefty flat magnet. I'll be watercoloring before I stamp, but doing this will give me the ability to visualize where the elements of my stamp will be and make sure that I'm going to add, did I say gonna? Sorry about that, that I'm going to add colors of paint where it makes the most sense to do so. Because we're using this floral stamp from Dare to Be Artsy, again it's from the BEEutiful line, for this floral bundle. I probably wouldn't like it if my leaf sprigs were pink, for instance, and so putting it into my MISTI so that I can visualize where the color should go is just super handy. Now, like I said, I don't think you have to have the MISTI tool to create this card. While they aren't super expensive, I think for this mini MISTI, it cost maybe around $45, but I realize that that's an investment. So I really think that if you don't have a mini MISTI in your stash already, you could make this card anyway. And I'd love to have your feedback about how that worked out so that I can pass it along to the rest of the community. I'll be using the same distress inks as watercolor on the card. I used an acrylic block and tapped down a bit of color onto it, which will turn into, wow, my phone is going off, ignore that, which will turn into watercolor ink. I don't even know what size paintbrushes I'm using really. I don't think it matters. I'm using a larger one to smear down water into the areas I'll be applying color to, and then a smaller one to pick up the distress ink and put it onto the card. I apologize in advance that you're not going to see too much because I keep sticking my big noggin in the way. I keep putting my arm in your face, and I keep checking back and forth here, so you know you're just missing some of it, but basically I'm checking back and forth with the stamp to verify the placement of the colors. You could do this by just angling your stamp on an acrylic block over top of it. Again, I realize you can't always see what I'm doing the best because that MISTI door and my head, but it doesn't need too much explanation. I'm trying to make sure that those center flowers have a bit of pink in them, that the top flower is mostly yellow, and that my leaf area is that really pretty peacock feathers. The painting is done, but now before I attempt any sort of stamping, I'm going to take it to my heat gun and hold that sucker under it until it is totally dry. Now I'm using Memento ink in Tuxedo Black, and you'll see me attempt a decent impression several times. That's what's good about this MISTI, is that when you're pretty sure it's going to be a rough time due to textured paper, the tool kind of has your back. In the end, I was left with a pretty decent impression. Now if there are any light spots that bother me, I'll just go back in with a super fine line Sharpie marker, but at a glance here, I don't think it's going to be needed. Nope, you won't see me cleaning my stamps. Cleaning in the craft room is boring, and no, please don't lecture. It's not going to change my mind, and I'm only wiping my hands on a baby wipe here so that I can hopefully pick up my card without ruining it. Now, I don't know why this happens, but sometimes when I pull that big magnet from my MISTI off my card, it will leave a few little black dots of some sort on the card. I use my sanding eraser and it usually pulls it right off. I'm sure there's a reason why it's happening. I haven't figured it out yet, but I'll go ahead and leave the link to the eraser in the video description along with everything else in case it happens to you. Now I apologize for my noggin and ooh, those roots. I have a hair appointment coming up, but apparently not soon enough. I'm just using a thin strip of washi as a decorative line on the card. I'm using white with black dots, and you could use whatever you have, but I love the offset that it gives to all the bright color on the front. I've left about 1/4 of an inch between the color border and the washi tape, and then I'm just trimming away that excess now. And that is as good as gold if you ask me, but if you're hunting for platinum, we can give it a sentiment. Now, there are several sentiments in the Beeutiful stamp set by Dare to Be Artsy, but because I don't know where or to whom this card is going, stay tuned for more on that, I'm going to use a general sentiment that says, Happy Everything. And because it's somewhat difficult to stamp on the inside of a card in a MISTI, mostly because you have to fold against the score line and it's not worth the risk to me, so in this case, I'm going to use just a trusty old acrylic block and that Tuxedo Black ink again to print inside. And then that is going to wrap up this sweet little card today. Remember that all of the cards that I make here for you, I send to someone who needs just a little bit of cheer. So if you know someone who could use this very card, comment on the card image on my Instagram. It's instagram.com/goodstuffmama, and I may just send it to someone you love. Hey, thanks again for joining me today on the simple card making video, and until next time, we dare you to be artsy. Bye!